So this is the press preview on Sky News, and in the next 30 minutes we'll see what's making the headlines with the Evening Standard columnist Ayesha Hazarika and The Sun's political editor Tom Newton-Dunn. Evening to you both. Before we have a chat, let's run you through the front pages, and the Metro has more on the growing diplomatic anger at North Korea after it fired a nuclear test missile towards Japan. The FT pictures President Trump addressing the media in the Texas flood zone, but its main story is a possible $30 billion deal in the aviation sector. The Times says a young girl controversially placed into foster care with a Muslim couple has been returned to the care of her own grandmother. The Guardian says one of the country's top grammar schools has been accused of dumping pupils who failed to do well in AS-level exams. The Telegraph reports teachers could be put in an impossible situation over cheating when setting their own exams because they might want to help their pupils do well. The Mail says GPs have been told to cut the number of hospital referrals in a bid to save money. For the Mirror, Princess Diana's former butler Paul Burrell has doubts about some of the events on the night that she died 20 years ago. The Eye says there's a pension time bomb awaiting some, especially low-paid self-employed workers. And The Sun reports on West Ham striker Andy Carroll reliving an attempted robbery during his appearance in court as a witness. So let's talk through the papers then with Ayesha and with Tom. And we'll start off with the one story, of course, that hasn't made the editions yet, because it's only just happened. Kezia Dugdale resigning as the leader of the Scottish Labour Party. I mean, this has come as a real surprise. Yes,
it has come as a huge surprise, and also to people, the top of the Scottish Labour Party as well. I've actually been in contact with Kezia in the short break that we've had, and what she has kind of relayed to me is that a lot of this was a personal decision for her. And the stuff she has said in her statement, she lost a very good friend this year, Gordon Aitman, and, she said the big lesson she had taken away from that is that life is short and you have to live it. And I think, she wanted to leave and she wanted to do it her way and on her own terms. So I think that's the kind of spirit in which she has done this. But it was a shock to people. I think even people who very close advisors didn't know about this. This was not, and contrary to what people might think, I don't think there was a specific plot or a specific organised, structured coup. Look, there are big divisions in the Labour Party. Corbyn, yeah, I don't think there wasn't a specific thing. It doesn't look like that is the case. I think there wasn't anything. I think she genuinely is sort of, certainly what she's communicated to me is that the time sort of felt right for her to do this. Now, remember, she was 32 when she became leader of the Labour Party in Scotland. It is not an easy job. It is a poison challenge, and whoever takes over will face a lot of problems as well. Scotland has had 5 Labour leaders in the last 10 years. It's been
statistic. I mean, that's fascinating from Ayesha, who literally, is getting this from the horse's mouth. Before Sky News billed her as an Evening Standard columnist, they used to put her as a former Labour advisor, which is the Ayesha I remember.
As Taylor Swift says, she's dead now.
and love the most. But despite this being obviously a personal decision, Kezia Dugdale didn't want to carry on leading the Scottish Labour Party. Without a doubt, some of the personal pressures that she would have felt that would have made her more uncomfortable in the job came from certainly Jeremy Corbyn and the people very close to him, who were at constant war with her, trying to force her down to take his line on where he wanted the Labour Party to go, the far more left-wing alternative rather than her, the more moderate one. And, whichever way you cut this, the Corbynistas are going to be quite pleased about this tonight.
Can I just say, just on one point on that quickly, I'm pretty close to Kezia, and actually I think there were certain things she was not on the same page as Jeremy Corbyn on, particularly the renewal of Trident, which was a very, very big issue. But actually a lot of the trade unions up in Scotland were on the same side as her. On quite a lot of the other issues, she was quite aligned to Corbyn. I mean, I think she was very much...
His election, didn't she?
She like many of us, she did not think Corbyn would be good as a leader in a general election, and many of us were proved wrong. But on quite a lot of issues, for example, she supported...
Didn't win it, did he?
No, she didn't. But you're saying about having lots of policy divisions. She actually, at the last set of Scottish elections, wanted the Labour Party in Scotland to have a 50% tax rate. I mean, she was dubbed as being quite sort of left-wing by people up in Scotland. So I think towards the end, the actual policy issues, it was not so much in substance. But you are right, we all know, there's no point in lying about it, there are internal tensions within the Labour Party, and she was very clear about what she thought about Corbyn as a leader.
Not anymore, because they're all taking the pills.
But I think taking the pills is a slightly unfortunate kind of phrase. I mean, I think she basically decided this was the right time for her, and you've got to respect that.
Well, she's done it now. She's done it now, so the decision has been made. Can we have a look at, well, it's quite a few of the papers actually this morning, but pictures of the First Lady and the President as they deal with the flooding in Texas.
The pictures coming out of the Trump's visit to Houston today are quite fantastic. And the Metro, if you can possibly fix that, I've got an even better one than the Telegraph's Top Gun-esque or disaster chic, as they wonderfully call it. And then you have Melania coming out of the White House with a bomber jacket that she's almost never worn before. You can tell that because it's still sort of, wrapper crumpled. But best of all, the high heels designed for 4.5 feet of floodwater not. And you certainly do wonder, what was really going through her mind when she was picking this wardrobe. It's another opportunity for her looking beautiful, which is where she's made her living, and certainly, met her husband. Or is it to feel the pain of the American people and their suffering? It doesn't really feel like.
I mean, I think that's my sort of kind of issue with it. I just sort of think, had we had Michelle Obama in this position, I don't think we would have had this beautiful sort of catwalk look. I think we would have had Michelle in her waders, literally out swimming to save people. And I think what these optics are very, very important in a disaster. And these optics could have been quite beneficial in a purely cynical way to the president, who is not hugely popular right now. But they've not been done the right way because they don't show any empathy. They show two people that look like they're doing a bit of a day trip to visit a disaster scene, and they're going to get as far away as possible.
Does it matter in real terms? I mean, they're there, they're offering the support that you'd expect from a president and the first lady. Does it really matter that she's turned up in?
I think it does.
Outfit?
I think a picture paints 1,000 words, and that picture does not look massive on the empathy for the victims. And Trump did a kind of a press thing, which you ran live just before we came on, and he didn't even mention the victims. I mean, if I were advising him, I would sort of say the first pictures you should do should be with some of the victims. We've all seen harrowing, arresting optics of old people sitting there with the water rising up, and he should have gone to actually meet some victims and seen what they are going through. And when he did those words, he didn't say anything about the victims. He actually said, he just went on about how much it was going to cost and how expensive it was going to be.
I think the truth of the matter is, although funny enough, if a British leader, a British politician, pulled the sort of stunts that Mr. and Mrs. Trump were pulling today and wore these outfits, they would be massacred. If you're a British cabinet minister and you turn up at a flood scene wearing the wrong type of Wellington boots, your Wellington boots happen to be made by Hunter, a far too posh a label like Liz Truss when she was Environment Secretary did a couple of years back, you are ripped to pieces. Forget high heels. The wrong wellies does it for you. I don't think this is going to change many views in America on what you think. If you hate the Trumps, you hate the Trumps. You love the Trumps, you love the Trumps. And, America is so incredibly split down the middle, it will continue like this. If you like Donald Trump, you'll love this bling. You'll love his beautiful wife coming down looking like Kelly McGuinness out of Top Gun. Yeah. That's the kind of country they are.
Yeah. Can we have a look at this in the Sun, looking at... I can't even see where it is now.
Pound shop Bismarck.
Oh, is that actually the Brexit? Oh, that's the Brexit story. Is it?
It's the big one in the middle.
I'm busy. I'm trying to, because I think I'm going to pull it off by. There, you need to get it back on. It disappeared from my iPad somehow, magically. There we go. What's this all about?
This is about The View, Jacob Rees-Mogg, who some have even a contender, future leader of the Tory party, although I think that's still rather unlikely. His view on Jean-Claude Juncker, who's the EU Commission President, who expressed some very dark views on Theresa May's Brexit position so far this morning, and by saying that it was effectively a load of all rubbish, didn't add up to much, and until she starts writing a big fat cheque, the negotiations are going to go precisely nowhere, and she certainly isn't going to get her trade deal. So Jacob Rees-Mogg takes huge anguish at this and calls Bismarck, what a terrible Freudian slip, calls Jean-Claude Juncker a pound shop Bismarck. Now, my view on what we're going to get an awful lot more of this Brexit talks as the months and even years go on, of effectively abuse heading from one side of the channel to the other, is we all need to take a tiny step back and think, why are the EU Commission, why is Juncker et al. Abusing us at the moment? Is it because we are generally making mistakes in our Brexit positions? Possibly. Or is it more likely that he too has a political audience he's trying to appeal to?
I say he's not even part of the negotiations, is
Well,
he?
he is. He's technically Michel Barnier's boss, who's the chief negotiator. So technically the EU have devolved the negotiation to the EU Commission. So he does have a peripheral, a figurehead role. But what we need to look at is the EU need to make Britain look uncomfortable publicly. Pour encourager les autres, as Voltaire once said. They need the rest of the EU to look at our squealing and our pain going through Brexit, so no one else takes the terrible path of making the same decision. Or certainly that's how Jean-Claude Juncker wanted. So they have to abuse us. I just don't think we should take it quite as seriously as they do every time they do.
Well, I think what we could all benefit from is Jacob Rees-Mogg just getting a massive bit of gaffer tape and sort of putting it right across his mouth for the foreseeable future.
What would we possibly do for headlines if he did a thing like that?
Yeah. In terms, because I just don't...
Headline writers would not be happy with you for saying anything like that.
I know, but country first, Tom, country first. But
Paper sales second. What?
But I do think that this is we're now round 3 of these negotiations. Not a huge amount of progress has been made. The clock is ticking. Nobody has a huge amount of confidence in how the team is doing so far. And it really doesn't help when people like Jacob Rees-Mogg kind of stir things up from the side and make these quite kind of ridiculous, unhelpful, juvenile comments.
Yeah, but isn't Jean-Claude Juncker stirring things up from the side as well? I mean, if he's doing it, why shouldn't we?
Well, that's not exactly the mature way to sort of look at things. And remember, we've got most. Yeah, of course it's good fun. But
the thing is,
we've got
this is what they would say.
This
is what they do.
But as Tom said
they
earlier,
like having a shout. They want us to look silly. It is all part of the RB. And by rising to it, we kind of end up playing their game.
But also, as Tom said, it's in their interest to make this transition and this negotiation and this eventual deal as sort of difficult as possible. We are the kind of weaker side in the negotiating, so it doesn't help us to give it the big one, like, on the sidelines, when actually we should be going in being really, really well prepared, really forensic about what we want and really clear about what's going to be the best thing for the country and for jobs and growth.
Giving it the big one? I'm not entirely sure what to do
and
with that
apparently
one.
taking pills is an appropriate type of language on this. I know what you're saying.
Yeah, you know.
Right, we're going to take a break at
this
that
is
point.
Big one.
We'll come up with some good news
I'm not saying that to you.
If you want a cheese sandwich tonight, you're in luck. So this is the press preview on Sky News, and we're talking through the papers with Ayesha Hazarika and Tom Newton-Dunn. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Look at the front of the Metro. Career on the brink, and obviously the situation with Career in a lot of the papers. You've picked a story, Tom, from the Mail, which gives us a slightly more sort of detailed perspective on what may be going on.
Yeah, a really interesting piece by Mark Armand in the Mail, who's a quite well-known Oxford historian, making the fascinating suggestion that Kim Jong-un may not be almost criminally insane after all, which you would certainly think of the behavioural characteristics of a man throwing potentially nuclear-tipped missiles over your next-door neighbour's country. And he writes entirely from this historical perspective, which is what the North Koreans think of the Japanese. And they loathe them. All this goes back to 35 years of Japanese occupation, right up until 1945, when the Japanese effectively ran the entirety of Korea, north and south, as a slave state. They would grow huge amounts of Japanese business, as well as agricultural products, and all the money would go straight back to Japan. Koreans weren't allowed to own business or really work or get educated. They'd send Korean women all around the world as comfort women to satisfy Japanese soldiers during their fighting overseas. And they never apologised, and they certainly never paid reparations. So Japanese bashing in Korea is very popular. Furthermore, Kim Jong-un's grandfather, the founder of the North Korean Communist Republic, was a celebrated, or at least called himself a celebrated Japanese resistance fighter. So it shores up his own base, makes himself popular in North Korea, and furthermore, it draws attention to Japan's remilitarization. Shinzo Abe, the Japanese Prime Minister, is very keen to grow the Japanese military again, and by encouraging Japan to potentially shoot down any missiles that Kim Jong-un fires at him, you then re-engage the debate about whether Japan should be having precisely that sort of military technology. So there is possibly quite a little bit more thinking behind this after all.
Yeah, well, look, it's an interesting perspective because you've then got to ask the question, well, it's one thing to sort of make this stance against Japan, but of course you're reigniting the fury across the entire international community as a result.
Yeah.
Who are doing nothing and which he cares little. So,
but also one of the
problems, cards are with him at the moment.
One of the problems is what can you do? You know, it's very, very difficult. You know, we can all do our sort of posturing and we can all express our outrage about everyone involved in this whole scenario, but it's very, very difficult to actually look at what are the practical options that are on the table. I mean, the sanctions, you know, we don't really know if the sanctions will have had an effect because everything has escalated. Nobody wants to sort of rush into anything.
Just as South Korea has said, I mean, that was the story on the front of the Metro. South Korea saying we could end him. Yeah. Basically, we'll just end it.
I think the truth is, as well the North Koreans know, neither the South Koreans or the Japanese are going to end him at all, and certainly neither will America. The truth is, and fascinating, Donald Trump's response to the provocation last night was incredibly moderated and reserved today. No talk of hellfire, brimstone and awe as he's done previously. It was quite a sort of a delicately written statement, which suggests that the generals in the White House who seem to have ousted the alt-right, the Steve Bannons of this world, are now prevailing, and sense might be coming over. If there is a solution to any of this, it will be a quite painful diplomatic one, with pressure being exerted on North Korea largely by the Chinese, which is going to play out at the UN Security Council roundabout now onwards when the meeting starts.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what comes of that meeting. We'll have the latest for you throughout the night, of course. Can we have a look at this on the front of the Times this morning? It's in a slightly different take on that, the inside pages of the Sun, I noticed. But looking at this Tower Hamlets case, this foster child, a white Christian child of 5, who's been supposedly put with a Muslim family, a very conservative Muslim family.
Yeah, I mean, look, we don't have all the facts of this story, but I have to say, look, these stories are always really difficult, and I think you have to always come at it from a sort of a common sense point of view. It's very easy to sort of play politics on either side of it, but you have to look at what are the needs of the child and how are they best met. You know, I'm from a Muslim background myself, but what I would say is it does seem to me quite strange that a child was put into an environment. The thing that concerns me is it says the family did not often speak English at home and encouraged her to learn Arabic. I think at the age of 5, if you are in foster care, you have probably come from a quite traumatic background. So communication and language and, you know, kind of, you know, just feeling comfortable is probably quite an important germane thing. And I think whatever your politics are, you would think that was sensible. So I do not know all of the facts of this, but it seems like something has gone awry on a common sense basis. But I think on the whole, you know, I think children can and should be placed, you know, with different families. I mean, you know, I know people who are Afro-Caribbean and they were adopted by sort of white families and had a completely happy, healthy, loving upbringing. But the point I think has to be is, I think language is quite an important basic, I would say.
Yeah. And culture. I mean, this story really has got nothing to do with religion at all, apart from the fact that, you know, the child needs to be where it is most comfortable, feels secure. If, for example, a child brought up as a Muslim was placed into quite a strict Christian family, there should be precisely the same level of outrage. And fascinatingly, the Times also reports that it was a Muslim judge, female Muslim judge, who made this decision to take the child away from the strict Muslim family and to another foster couple a little bit more suited to him.
Yeah.
And that's probably where the insanity has gone in this story, that sort of bizarre decisions with no interest to the child's actual well-being at heart.
Well, there seems to be, it looks like there's going to be some resolution to that. We're out of time, really. I just want, in 20 seconds, talk us through the food story.
Eat cheese.
Oh, excellent, lovely.
So
eat cheese, get fat, but don't die.
Eat cheese. So the latest, I mean, we get all this different diet information, but the latest one apparently is saying that actually it is okay to eat things like red meat and butter and cheese. We're always told not to, but I think the wisdom is it's better to have a bit of natural food rather than, you know, having lots of, you know, low fat but high sugar.
As my mother would say, a bit of what you fancy does you good. Lovely. Good to see you both.
We're talking about food here.
Good to see you both. Thank you. And let's get a quick check on the weather for you.